And let's start, as one must, of course, with the number one most valuable company in the entire universe, and I'm talking, of course, of Apple. It's a seller of consumer electronics, software, and personal computers, not to forget its iPad and MacBook range. But by far the most important contributor to its profits are the iPhone 6s, which is available in two flavors, as you all know, iPhone 6 and the iPhone 6 Plus, which is a little larger. Market capitalization of $761 billion. That is the most valuable company in the world by quite a margin. Price to earnings ratio based on results that were released last night, 16.1. Dividend yield of 1.6%. So what does one say when you talk about Apple? Let's look at the share price chart first, because this is rather interesting. You can see it has a bit of a bad patch from 2012 through 2013 when it sagged a little bit. It has since moved back all-time high territory. Remember too that it had a 7-for-1 split about a year ago. So the share price chart you're looking at there, $123, pretty close to its all-time high. Interestingly, it was at 130 at the close of business last night. Then it had its quarterly results, and it looks as though it's going to open up 7% lower. What's that about? Well, they sold nearly 50 billion iPhone 6s during the quarter, but those results weren't the blowout excess beat that you normally experience with Apple. Clearly, the MacBook range is doing very well. It's the only supplier of PCs which is currently seeing market share gains. So this old dinosaur that I have here on the desk, right? What is this? This is a Hewlett-Packard, HP. That's a disgrace. I wouldn't be using this thing if it wasn't in the studio. My own computer is a MacBook, you can be sure. The iPad, I'm not a big user of the iPad. It seems a little low-powered to me. And the iPad sales, in fact, have been rather sideways. But these things, these iPhone 6s, basically everybody wants one of these. They have totally dominated the iPhone 6 sales. The iPhone 6 is so dominant in the cell phone handset market that all the rest of the competitors pale into insignificance. There's a statistic which I saw recently. 92% of the profits in the cell phone industry go to Apple. Another 15 goes to Samsung. You add those two together, it's more than 100%. Why? Because everybody else in this market makes losses. So clearly, the iPhone is the far preferred model, and it is far preferred not only in the United States and rich markets, it is also now rapidly the number one selling cell phone in China. And you know how many Chinese people there are. They're all hungry for this thing. There is going to be a product refresh coming. At this time of the year, normally sales of the iPhones settle down a little bit because people start to wait for what is coming next, which will definitely be the iPhone 6s. Possibly they're going to call it the iPhone 7. It is rumored to be just a update with regard to the inside, so slightly faster chip, slightly better internal properties, slightly better battery life. That's always important. Probably the same form, so not a bigger screen, not a different shape, which is a key issue with the sort of S ranges. Yes, sales in this particular cycle might have disappointed slightly, but certainly not disappointing in China, which is very important. And I would say on balance, Apple is poised perfectly. A couple of new developments on the software front should also be mentioned. I think people will be aware that the latest version of the software on the phones contains a software killer, which is the Apple Music service, which for the first time globally introduces a market rental of music which competes with Spotify. So in the old days, it was very much buying your own music on iTunes. If you've used and updated to the new version of Apple Music, you'll notice that it all comes by way of an internet connection. Sure, the kids might have a bit of a problem with that because they don't have unlimited data, but it has been very well received. The Apple Music algorithm knows what kind of music you like. So they know that I love Britney Spears, Rihanna, you know, the latest Fifth Harmony, and they know that I like that stuff, so it keeps playing that stuff to me again and again when I'm driving in my car. That's the power of the Apple device. And at the broader level, it's also the power of the Apple ecosystem. Once you have a Mac and an iPhone, You're like part of their network. They have your ID details, your Apple user key, your cell phone connection, your ability to connect, and more importantly, your credit card details. So as you upgrade these things, as you're buying music, as you're renting these things, as you're using apps, you're basically connected. The question, I guess, is I'm ranting and raving here about Apple, but, it's the world's most valuable company. Is it a good idea at $123 a share still to be buying Apple? The history in the past of buying the world's most valuable company doesn't normally end well because, you know, how are you going to grow off that base? But understand that Apple has a price to earnings ratio only 16, so it's not particularly expensive relative to its forward earnings. If they continue to dominate in the global phone market as they have been, there is no question for me that it is a hot stock and a strong buy. Yes, they have done well. Yes, they continue to execute well. But with Tim Cook at the helm, with Johnny Ive in the design studio, with future iterations of the iPhone coming, there is no doubt in my mind that they're going to continue to do well and sell well and make mega profits, because there are still many people in the world who want to own an iPhone who do not own one yet. It doesn't matter whether the iWatch, the Apple Watch, is a big success or not. That thing has high margins and relatively narrow market opportunity. By far the most important point to note with Apple is that they are still a strong buy as a consequence of their exciting future for the iPhones. Good. So there you have it. If you're moving funds offshore, if you're setting up an offshore portfolio, Apple is an absolute must-have. I own like $130,000 worth of Apple shares. That's about 1.5 million rands worth. I would not sell them for anything in the world. I'm accumulating more whenever I have the opportunity to do so.